The Titanic was the largest, most luxurious, and most technologically advanced ship of its era. It set off on its first voyage from Southampton to New York in 1912, but sank after hitting an iceberg in less than 3 hours. How did this newest ship of its time, often called unsinkable, meet its demise? How many individuals perished in this disaster? The captivating and enigmatic tale of the Titanic has sparked numerous books, films, documentaries, and hypotheses. In this video, we'll explore fascinating and unique events from the Titanic's interesting and unconventional design to its sinking. Unsinkable ship. Titanic became a big dream. It's constructed through a British transport organization called White Star Line. In the advent of the Titanic, the emphasis changed to positioning on its grand scale and opulence in place of its pace. The Titanic's dazzling proportions protected a length of 269 meters and a height of 53 meters. Its weight amounted to 46,128 tons, imparting space for 547 passengers, crew protected. The Titanic had 4 eating places, 2 cafes, a swimming pool, a gym, a Turkish tub, a squash court docket, a library, a barber keep, a sub-mid office, and even a wireless telegraph room. There were 840 staterooms, starting from private prom suites to cramped cabins with bunk beds. Additionally, there were 20 lifeboats able to wear 1,178 people in case of an emergency. Considered a miracle by using all accounts, the Titanic had a double hull, divided into 16 watertight booths. It featured a triple-screw propeller gadget powered by 29 boilers and 159 furnaces that may propel the Titanic at a pace of 24 knots, 44 kilometers per hour. The Titanic additionally had a wireless telegraph gadget that would send and get hold of messages over a distance of 400 miles. It also carried the Marconi distress sign, which is used to alert nearby ships in the event of an emergency. Also, the Maximum Superior Navigation System protected a magnetic compass, gyro compass, sextant, and chronometer, a microcosm of society. Titanic contemplated the stark elegance divisions of the early 20th century. For this reason, it was divided into 3 instructions for passengers. Rich businessmen, politicians, and celebrities had been accommodated in pleasant passengers, who enjoyed the great service, just like the maximum pricey accommodation, best food, and enjoyment. They all paid between $30 to $870 for tickets, equivalent to between $3,000 to $87,000 today. Second-class passengers had been center elegance, which included instructors, clerks, artists, and others, who paid between $12 to $60 for tickets, which these days could be between $1,200 to $6,000. The third class carried decreased class passengers, along with many immigrants, laborers, and farmers. Passengers paid between $3 to $8 for any tickets, equal to between $3 and $2 to be $18 these days. The class department defined no longer the physical format of the delivery but additionally the interactions and expectancies of the passengers. Due to its precise layout and comfort, the Titanic was declared the unsinkable delivery, a masterpiece of engineering and beauty. First trip. On the afternoon of April 10, 1912, with 2,120 passengers and crew on board, the Titanic began its maiden voyage from Southampton, England. The ship was commanded by veteran sailor Captain Edward J. Smith. The Titanic had to make 3 stops before reaching its final destination, New York. The first is the French city of Cherbourg, where Chahaz arrived at 6:30 p.m. and picked up 274 more passengers, including American billionaire John Jacob Astor IV, Macy's department store owners Isidore and Ida Strauss. The second stop was Queenstown, Ireland, where the Titanic arrived at 11:30 a.m. the next day and picked up another 123 passengers, mostly Irish immigrants seeking a better life in America. The third and final stop was New York, where the ship was scheduled to arrive at 5 a.m. on Wednesday, April 17th. Titanic's voyage across the Atlantic was smooth and uneventful for the first 4 days. The weather was clear and calm. Passengers continued to enjoy various facilities and activities. En route from Ireland to New York, Titanic received numerous iceberg warnings from other ships in the area. All these warnings were either ignored. There were several reasons for this. At first, wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride engaged in sending and receiving personal messages for passengers, which was a source of income for them and the Marconi Company. Second, the captain, officers, and crew were confident in the ship's design and believed it could withstand any collision or damage. They didn't want the ship to slow down or change course. Third, there were poor weather conditions that made it difficult to see the snowflakes, conflict, and chaos. The Titanic hit the iceberg on Sunday, April 14th at 11:40 p.m., which proved to be extremely fatal for the ship and its passengers. Moments earlier, the explorer, Frederick Flett, spotted the iceberg and rang the bell 3 times, signaling danger. He also telephoned the bridge and informed them. William Murdoch, who was in charge of the watch, ordered the quartermaster, Robert Hitchens, to turn the ship to the left. In order to prevent the ship from being hit by an iceberg or to minimize damage, the Titanic's speed at that time was about 22 knots, 40.7 kilometers per hour. Was the ship's hull scraped against the iceberg, leaving a hole that stretched about 300 feet from the bow to boiler room number 6. The damage caused by the collision was so devastating that many of the passengers and crew did not even realize it. The Titanic's watertight compartments began to fill. The captain of the ship assessed the situation and consulted with Thomas Andrews, the ship's builder, who was traveling as a passenger. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the captain ordered to evacuation of the ship. Drowning and the struggle for survival. The sinking of the Titanic and the struggle for survival were the most dramatic and tragic stages of this disaster. It took about 2 hours and 40 minutes from collision to final bed. It also exposed flaws and failures in the ship's design, management, and evacuation. The sinking of the Titanic was a gradual and uneven process. As the forward compartments filled with water, the ship began to pitch forward and sink from the bow. As the forward compartments filled up, the inclination increased. Lifeboats were the only means of escape for passengers and crew, but even they were not sufficient for all passengers. The 20 lifeboats on the Titanic were used, and only 1178 of the 2209 people could be aboard. First-class passengers had the best chance of survival, as they were closer to the lifeboats and had more influence and support. Second-class passengers had a moderate chance of survival, as they were also close to the lifeboats and had some access and support. Third-class passengers were the least likely to survive, as they were furthest from the lifeboats. Crew members also had different chances of survival, depending on their rank and role. The engine room and boiler room crews were the least likely to survive, as they were trapped in fluted compartments and were responsible for operating the ship's electricity and lights. Wireless operators, bands, and stewards also had less chance of survival, as they remained at their posts until the end, sending messages, playing music, and comforting passengers. The struggle for survival was also affected by temperature and time. The temperature in the North Atlantic was about 2 degrees, freezing and deadly. The closest ship to receive the Titanic's distress signal was the Carpathia, about 58 miles away. It took the Carpathia nearly 4 hours to reach the scene, by which time most of the Titanic's passengers and crew had perished. The final sinking of the Titanic was a dramatic and famous moment. It happened at 2:20 a.m., about 2 hours and 40 minutes after the collision. The plane was tilted at an angle of about 30 degrees. Due to the weight and pressure, at 2:20 a.m., the Titanic split in two, with a loud thud heard by the survivors. The sinking of the Titanic was one of the most tragic and famous events in history, and it left a lasting impact on the world. Consequences and prevention. The sinking of the Titanic left behind a scene of devastation and despair. More than 1,500 people died in the disaster, while only 705 survived. The survivors faced a long and agonizing night waiting for help to arrive. The Carpathia's captain, Arthur Rostron, immediately ordered his crew to prepare for a rescue operation and steered his ship at full speed toward the Titanic, dodging icebergs along the way. Carpathia arrived at the sinking site at 4 a.m., about an hour and a half after the Titanic disappeared, and began lifting survivors from lifeboats using ropes, ladders, and cranes. The rescue operation continued for about 4 hours until all the lifeboats were withdrawn. The Carpathia sails to New York, carrying survivors and memories of the Titanic. The news of the sinking of the Titanic shocked and outraged the world. The Titanic was considered the safest and most luxurious ship ever built, yet it sank on its maiden voyage with heavy casualties. The public demanded answers and accountability, and the media sensationalized the story with headlines, stories, and images of the devastation. Several inquiries and investigations were launched to determine the causes and consequences of the sinking. The British and American governments held hearings where they questioned survivors, crew, shipowners, builders, and regulators. The inquiry revealed many flaws and failures in the design, construction, operation, and regulation of the Titanic. After this, there were many changes and reforms in the maritime industry. The sinking of the Titanic was a wake-up call to the world, and it improved the safety and security of the maritime industry.